Great to have you once again. We're looking at the definition of mental illness. And we're saying for most of us, if an individual is not able to properly manage environmental stress due to poor nurturing, negative lifestyle circumstances, abnormal genes and chromosomes inherited, mental illness develops. So, if an individual has a difficulty managing environmental stresses, and these environmental stresses can come about as a result of poor nurturing, negative life circumstances, abnormal genes, and chromosomes inherited. So, basically, looking at either the genetic approach or the genetic factors and the environmental factors, we will conclude that mental illness arises. Now, to look at a specific definition for mental illness, we will say serious mental illness is a behavioral or emotional disorder, excluding developmental and substance use disorders, resulting in serious functional impairments which substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. For emphasis on mental illness, we will exclude developmental and substance use disorders in this regard. That developmental illness are more or less defects of the neurological system, and for that matter, doesn't play a significant role in someone developing mental illness as a condition, but rather it will be a congenital or genetic defect one is born with. So, for that matter, it will be best considered as a neurological disorder and will not fit into psychotic or psychiatric disorders. So, in the purpose or regarding the scope of our lesson, neurological disorders won't come into play. So, conditions like spinal bifida, conditions like cerebral palsy, conditions like should I say Steven Johnson's? No, Steven Johnson's won't form part here. Let's see. Other neurological disorders. Like reflex disabilities and the likes might not help in describing what we have here. So when someone is having a neurological disorder, then it means that the person has a damage or dysfunction in the spinal cord or the function or the brain itself. Right from birth, the person develops with that, and that wouldn't be something that through mental health management we can restore that person's functionality. Again, substance use disorders are things that do not get to be considered as mental disorders until they manifest psychotic symptoms in the use of the drugs. So someone can use heroin, someone can use cannabis, someone can use cocaine, and until the cocaine use is marked with gross dysfunction of function, let's say gross dysfunction to his social interactions, gross dysfunction to his occupational interactions, we don't conclude that the person is having a mental illness. So the mere use of a substance does not denote the person having a mental illness unless the substance use disorder is marked with psychotic symptoms. Next, we are going to look at the definition of mental illness as proposed by the American Psychiatric Association. This body of knowledge defines mental illness as an illness with psychological or behavioral manifestation. and impairment in functioning. And this psychological manifestation with impairment in function should be considered or should be due to the social, genetic, biological, or social psychological disturbance. So the person must have disturbances in one, psychological functioning; two, there should be a disturbance in the genetic makeup, which can be chemical or physical; and there should be a disturbance in the psychological and the biological functioning. So when these factors come together to cause a change in behavioral activity or to cause a change in activities or functions that the person previously could perform, we say the person has a mental disorder. We are saying this disorder is not limited to relationships between the person and the society, but can go beyond that. The reason being that when someone develops a mental illness, it doesn't always have to come from the social setting, but also an interpersonal approach can contribute to mental illness. And what do we mean by this? If an individual has a conflict within himself, that is the interaction between his past experiences and his present experiences cause a considerable amount of conflict, the person can develop a mental illness. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that the society is not receiving the person well, or the society is not interacting with the person well. But a person's past experiences can conflict or can expose the person to marked disturbances if it doesn't agree with his present challenges. For instance, if someone is exposed to social abuse as he is a child, or someone is exposed to neglect by his parents in his or her past life, if this particular experience the person had in his past exists in his subconscious or conscious mind, it is likely to affect how he or she gives attention to people around him presently, or how he or she even gives him or herself attention. By so doing, the person has difficulty paying attention to particular needs that he will have as an individual. Probably his need for intimacy, probably his need, he paying attention to his or her personal hygiene. At this approach, we are saying that the past experience is conflicting he trying to do that in his present life. So for that matter, that person can neglect the personal hygiene and contribute to he or she developing mental illness. Feel free to ask questions, contributions, or comments below your viewing box as and when we go through the study. We're saying that mental illness at all costs or in all circumstances is characterized by impairment in functions. That being said, things that previously you could achieve based on your defect in function, you should have a challenge performing those functions, and that is when we say that you are suffering from mental illness. Now let's have a general discussion here about the causes of mental illness. I want us to cast our minds back to our upbringing and identify certain things we were told as the causes of mental illness and type them in as our general discussion. So I'll give a few minutes break and I'll wait for your comments as we continue. So I want you to give me your comment as to what growing up you were nurtured as to be the cause of mental illness, or you were taught as to be the cause of mental illness through your social interactions with the family.